CBS television network presents a special program on the American Jew, a tribute to freedom, written by David Eden. In the next hour, we will inquire into the affairs of one of America's minority groups, with the hope that there is inherent in the story of one group a story for all. Our narrator, Jeff Chandler.
I tend to be an historian, or a sociologist, or an expert on our times. My one qualification for being here is a simple one. In common with 5.5 million other people in this country, I'm an American Jew. Nothing more, nothing less than that. But those two words are far easier said than understood. What is an American Jew? It's a question many of us ourselves have difficulty in answering. Who and what am I? I haven't brought the answers with me, only my curiosity, and the hope that today, by seeing and talking to many different people, we might fix a portrait of one American group. First of all, what's a Jew? Well, they tell me that my grandfather, when he first came to this country, sailed past the Statue of Liberty to Ellis Island, looked something very much like this man. Some people, with their own peculiar type of vision, have claimed that Jews look like this. And others once saw fit to make them look like this. But this is 1958. And if you should want to meet a typical American Jew, you might do well to travel to the very heart of America. As a matter of fact, to the geographic center of the United States, to Butte County, South Dakota, the farm of Mr. Sam Bober, where he and his son are questioned by a CBS News correspondent.
Mr. Bober, when you came out west, was this the land you settled on?
When I first came here, I managed a farm in the eastern part of South Dakota in 1914. And in the spring of 1915, I came here and homesteaded and stayed here ever since.
Mr. Bober, you've told me that your people were one of the few Jewish families permitted to work the land in Tsarist Russia. What made them leave?
At the time we left Russia, conditions for Jews were terrible. They persecuted them because of their belief. They burned homes. They killed people on sight. And then at the same time, my father heard about the opportunities in this country where people could work at jobs that they liked, at jobs that they can do well for themselves. And we actually stole out across the border at the risk of our lives. They were shooting at both sides of the river when we left Russia.
And so you came here. Are there many other Jewish people on the land? Working farmers, I mean?
Oh, there are about 100,000 Jewish farmers scattered in the United States. Most of them in the eastern states, but I've visited communities in California, and we have a few of them in North Dakota. We have a few of them in the eastern part of South Dakota. We have some in Iowa. We have some in Wyoming, some very fine stockmen, very good farmers.
What was it like in 1914 when you first came here? Were you accepted by the neighbors, or did you meet with any hostility of any kind?
No, we didn't, because there were no clannishness. We had a wonderful set of people in this area, mostly Scandinavian folks, who came here to build a new life in a new country. The opportunities in this country were really wonderful. Each one was able to advance as far as his abilities would permit.
A farmer, Sam Bober, finds the Dakotas a good place for a man to make his home. If you want to generalize, though, you can say that most American Jews live in some 16 large cities of our country. As a matter of fact, more than 20% live where I was born, in Brooklyn. But like the rest of America, an increasing number each year are drifting out to the suburbs. And in every state of the Union, you can find them as members of small towns or communities. A village like East Orange, New Jersey, where you're likely to discover he's not a doctor or a lawyer or a businessman, but the man who puts out your fires. Uniformed Fireman Murray Dim, badge number 109.
What made you choose the fire department, Murray?
I thought I would like that type of work, rendering a public service, and also having a job that offered security and paid vacation and good working conditions. I believe I found what I wanted right here.
Well, Murray, you're a product of a small community, not of the New York City area. Is that right?
That's right. I've spent all my life in New Jersey. I've never had the inclination or the desire to go into New York and mingle with the masses. I'm satisfied to stay here.
Well, are you the only Jew working here at this firehouse?
That's correct.
What does it feel like working as the only Jew? Do you ever feel isolated?
Well, there's no special feeling attached to it. I feel pretty much like one of the men. I think that they've accepted me as such. There are no special considerations or conditions made for me, and this is as it should be, since I'm just the same as they are. I do the same work that they do, and I think it's a good feeling pretty much all around.
Well, Murray, just what is your definition of a Jew?
Oh, a Jew would be a person who follows the teachings of Judaism, namely the belief in the Torah and the Talmud, which is nothing more than the laws of God, as first handed down to Israel over 5,000 years ago.
Well, would you say that in the last 10 years or so, people have become more tolerant, perhaps? Is that what you think?
Not tolerant exactly, but more willing to accept, which is, I think there's a difference between tolerating a person and accepting a person. I think that the Jew is on more so than ever, on a plane of social acceptance than ever before.
Today, as with the rest of the citizens of the United States, Murray Dim and his fellow American Jews live accordingly, integrated with the knowledge that they have earned their way. The parents of a fireman from East Orange, New Jersey, were originally immigrants from Austria some 45 years ago. But the American Jewish community goes back farther than that. When did the first Jews come here to this land? Perhaps the answer from a man who knows our land well, cartoonist Al Capp.
Perhaps in the beginning with Columbus in the year 1492, the year the dread Inquisition drove every Jew out of Spain, and one, out of convenience, was driven to take a ship with Columbus himself on the flagship, the Santa Maria. A man by the name of Louis de Torres, hired on, since this was to be a voyage to the fabulous East, as a linguist, knowing Arabic and Aramaic. A man reported to have been the first European to set foot on the land Columbus discovered.
But it was not until 1654 that the first Jewish settlement in North America was established, in the Dutch colony of New Amsterdam, which is today New York City. A boatload of 23 Jews fleeing an Inquisition which had pursued them across the sea and hounded them out of Brazil.
By the outbreak of the Revolutionary War, America's Jews numbered 2,500. And as they have fought in all of America's wars since, they fought in this one. At Bunker Hill, Abraham Solomon. At the siege of Savannah, David Emanuel, whose bravery was later remembered by the people of Georgia when they elected him governor. Officers such as Lieutenant Colonel David Franks and Major Benjamin Nonis, who served with distinction on the staffs of Lafayette and Washington. And men behind the lines who pledged their businesses to finance the war for independence. Men like Chaim Solomon, Jacob Hart, and Mordecai Sheftall. By 1840, there were 15,000 American Jews, drawn to a nation that granted them more civil rights than any other country in the Western world. And many headed west as traders and peddlers, opening up the frontier with the earliest pioneers.
As an American, as a Jew, as a member of any group that is deeply attached to its own past, you realize that the time for pioneers isn't over. 100 years ago or today, there are still wildernesses that must be crossed. And if not new lands to be gained, simple liberties that have to be fought for each step of the way. Here is one man who has led this fight, former Senator Herbert H. Lehman.
Senator, your family has been in this country for more than 100 years. Was there any discrimination they had to face when they first came here?
No, there was not. My father came over here, as I've told you, in 1848 to escape what he considered discrimination and oppression in Germany. He was immediately received most cordially by the community in which he settled, Montgomery, Alabama. He became a citizen 5 years later, as early as he possibly could. And it's an amazing thing how quickly he integrated himself and was integrated by the community into the life of Alabama and of the South.
Well, would you say, sir, that the background of oppression of people like your father when he was in Europe has left any special imprint?
I have the feeling that those sufferings have caused the Jews to have a greater appreciation than most people of the blessings of liberty and of freedom of every legitimate kind, which is theirs as a right in this country. They realize how important it is not only to say thank you for my liberties, but to do everything in their power to defend those liberties, to make certain that every man and woman and child in this country is equal under the law, that every man, woman, and child has an equal opportunity for good, free education, that every person, regardless of race or creed or color, be eligible for the same opportunities in employment. It's been a great factor, I think, in developing a liberal spirit in this country. And that, too, goes back to the fact that they know how dangerous it is to yield on the principle of equal liberty and equal rights for all people.
In America, a land of opportunity, century-old instincts and notions as to what makes for decent living have found a perfect setting. Room, finally, to express what has long been stifled. A chance, finally, to take part in and be a part of the job of building a great nation. No wonder, then, like all peoples, we take pride in those of us who have made good and done good.
Men who in recent times have fought for their country in days of peace, men like Supreme Court Justices Brandeis, Cardozo, Frankfurter, elder statesman Bernard Baruch, senators like Lehman and Javits of New York, Neuberger of Oregon, and the governor of Connecticut, Abraham Ribicoff.
And men, to mention a few, who fought for their country in days of war. In the War of 1812, Captain Uriah Levy, instrumental in having flogging in the Navy abolished. A prospector from the gold rush of 1848, August Bondi, abolitionist who fought with John Brown in Kansas. Color Sergeant of the 57th Massachusetts Infantry, Leopold Capellis, awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for his actions at the bloody Battle of the Wilderness. In World War I, Sergeant Ben Kaufman awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. And in World War II, where 600,000 saw service, heroes such as Sergeant Meyer Levin of Brooklyn, who on this day, 17 years ago, as a bombardier in Captain Colin Kelly's plane, disabled the Japanese battleship Haruna.
Many died so that democracy could live. Reasons were above politics and economics. It was proven that an attack on one minority was only a prelude to the threat on all. History has taught all people to dread an atmosphere of unreason. And once again, as was true in the first days of the Revolutionary War, all Americans remembered that they could not isolate themselves from truth or ever allow the oppression of the old world to take root here, an oppression whose cry of anguish was recorded in the last century by the French Jewish composer Halevi. Richard Tucker sings from Halevi's La Juive, the Jewess.
Rochelle, quand dit Seigneur, la grâce titulaire, en me tremblant ta main, confie à ton berceau. Je veux à ton bonheur vouer ma vie entière. C'est moi qui te livre à bourreau. Je veux entière. Et c'est moi qui te livre à bourreau. Et c'est moi qui te livre au bourreau. J'entends une voix qui me crie: sauvez-moi de la mort qui m'attend. Je suis jeune et je tiens à la vie. Oh, ma père, épargnez votre enfant. Je suis jeune et je tiens à la vie. Oh, épargnez votre enfant. Rochelle, comme dit Seigneur, la grâce qui te l'air, en ma tremblante main, confie à ton berceau. Je veux attendre, où est ma vie entière. C'est moi qui te livre à bourreau. C'est moi qui te livre au bourreau. Rachel, qui te livre au bourreau. Rachel, et moi qui te livre au bourreau.
What's an American Jew? Perhaps someone like Richard Tucker, whom we just heard, who as a boy played football for the Utrecht High School in Brooklyn, who as a man served as a cantor in a synagogue, and who once said, "To me, the truth implies that I am willing to face the consequences of my actions." The search for truth, though, is the monopoly of no one man or group. But perhaps for those who are newcomers to this country, or whose families were, there's a more pressing drive to find a place in the social order of things, to make a blend of old worlds and new. Most important of all, a chance to express themselves. If I remember anything I was taught as a kid at PS 181 in Brooklyn, it was that America was a land of self-expression, a place to respond to opportunity, a land in which it was possible for men to develop their talents, for the children of any one community to be of service to all. For it was a land where the languages and the fruits of science are universal.
A land which has made possible a Dr. Bela Schick, who developed the scratch test for diphtheria. And more recently, the discovery of a polio vaccine by Dr. Jonas Salk of Pittsburgh. And from New Jersey, Dr. Selman Waxman, discoverer of streptomycin and other antibiotics. The names are many and still continuing. Men of healing and men of pure and applied science. Men who helped to open up the world of the atom. Mathematicians and physicists. Albert Einstein. And J. Robert Oppenheimer of Princeton. And Professor I. Rabi, Nobel Prize winner from Columbia University.
This is but one measure of fulfillment of the promise of the United States. A community made up of hundreds of communities where every man has a chance to be himself and to give of himself. And American Jews like giving, whether to their own fields of interest or to charity, to which they contribute some $200 million each year. Like Al Capp, who serves as chairman of the Sister Kenny Foundation.
Bill Atwood, in his article in Look magazine, said this: "What Jews do, they do intensely. They're anything but lackadaisical. Jews are just like everybody else, only more so," unquote.
Our search for answers, for lines to fill in the portrait, took us to all parts of the country. To the side of a road in North Carolina where our CBS News correspondent spoke to a man on a bus, a circuit-riding rabbi, Rabbi Ralph Weisberger, commissioned by the North Carolina Association of Jewish Men to bring the ceremony and sense of synagogue to isolated people.
Sir, as a rabbi traveling to 8 widely scattered southern communities, are you aware of any special religious needs for your people?
The religious needs of people in this part of the country, North or South Carolina, I would say would be the same as those any place else in any other part of this country. They're in small communities, but being in small communities any place else would of course be the same problems. There's one difference here, however. Most rabbis serve one congregation. It might be Orthodox, it might be Reform, it might be Conservative. I serve 8 communities on a permanent basis, and these vary. Some towards the more Orthodox, some towards the more Reform, some towards the more Conservative, and some, if they'll excuse me, not knowing where they fit in. But in each case, we are not too dogmatic about trying to impress anything upon these people, but rather we try and serve each community according to their needs.
Well, does religious freedom have a unique meaning for Jews?
One point I would like to make in general, that the struggle of the Jew for religious freedom is a struggle of the entire world. In ancient days in Israel, at Hanukkah time, the Maccabees, a handful of people, fought for religious freedom. They were fighting for the world. And if their victory had not been triumphant for religious freedom, the world might not have any religion at all. I would say that the struggle for freedom in the South and the position of the Jew is important for civilization in general and important for America.
Can this message of Hanukkah be directly related to the current dilemma of your people?
The problem is not one of the South and not of the North. It is not one of the Negro and not of the white. It is not one of the Jew when a synagogue is bombed. But it is a problem of mankind, the problem of America. Let no American sleep in peace at night until this problem is solved by America for all Americans.
A farmer in South Dakota, a fireman in East Orange, a rabbi on a side road in North Carolina. But if you want to generalize, you can say that the typical American Jew is in some form of trade. His father may well have been a shopkeeper, and the boy who a few years ago could conceive only of becoming a doctor, dentist, or lawyer is now just as likely to enter into a career of architecture, engineering, or civil service. And if you want to generalize further, you can say that he's native born, but most probably his ancestors came over from Europe a generation ago. The largest wave of Jewish immigrants came to America at the turn of the century, nearly all of them streaming into New York Harbor.
Past the Statue of Liberty, their first steps out of steerage onto Ellis Island, bringing with them the look and the music and the traditions of the old world. Some 2 million people from 1881 to 1914 who had driven out of Russia, Lithuania, Romania, and Poland, at last found a resting place here, an end to wandering, each bringing with them an average capital of $8 with which to make a beginning. A new life that began to so many in America's great melting pot, the East Side streets of New York, where a score of nations rubbed elbows and worked 16 hours a day for a wage of $12 a week, convinced that at last here a man's dream was no illusion. A man could work his way up and make a life for his family. A day when life was hard, but forever filled with hope. And the nights were filled with grown-ups going to school, often sitting side by side with their children. Nights when local libraries were still not yet desert wastelands for occasional people doing research. But a rush hour-like scene where new Americans did double time, reading and studying this wonderful world of freedom. A place for the old, room for the young, a time for great beginnings.
Streets of the old East Side still serve today. A new home for other peoples of different backgrounds and traditions. Still alive with street noises and peddlers, push carts, and rare out-of-the-way places to eat. A bazaar, bustling and brimming over. America in each generation has always managed to find room and to make room. And at Idlewild Airport in New York is a young woman. A young woman who touched down 10 years ago, Miss Leah Turnbach, stewardess for Pan American Airways.
Can you tell me something about your background?
I was born in Sarajevo, Yugoslavia, and when the war broke out and the rest of my family was taken to a concentration camp, my mother and I hid in the attic of our home until my uncle was able to escape the concentration camp and come and help us and take us back to a part of Yugoslavia that was occupied by the Italians.
Well, you lived in Spalato, Yugoslavia at that time, if I'm not mistaken. What happened there?
We were forced to leave when the Germans came. So we hid in various parts of the city until our neighbors gave us away and they told the Gestapo that we were Jews, and we were brought to prison for a couple of days. But then the Americans started bombing so heavily around Spalato that the Germans just didn't know what to do with us. They couldn't bring us to a concentration camp or anything at that point, so they let my mother and I go free, and we, with the aid of some people in Yugoslavia, we were able to escape into the partisans.
Well, Leah, as one of hundreds of thousands of new Americans since the end of the war, would you say that you felt any extra urgency in integrating yourself here?
Yes, definitely. Even more so, I think. I feel more strongly about it because, we have suffered so much during the war, and to be able to come back on our feet, and I would like for us to prove to people, for them to realize that we're just like anyone else. We just believe in a different religion, that's all.
Leah Turnbach, as a child of 11, hid from the Nazis in an attic. By a miracle and through the open door of our country, she made it. And if you ask what is an American Jew, you may find that he's also one who cannot forget so quickly those who didn't make it. The 6 million people who were wiped out under Hitler. Or of another little girl who hid from the Nazis in an attic in Holland. A girl who might have been an American today. A girl called Anna Frank. A girl whose story came to life on the Broadway stage in a vivid portrayal by Miss Susan Strasberg. Susan, did you ever keep a diary as a child?
Oh, no, Jeff, I never did. I guess the reason for that was that I always had a friend that I could confide in or talk to. I think Anna had no one to talk to, so she told it to her diary. She even gave it a name, Kitty, so that it would be more like a girlfriend.
Was it a problem to take on the role of Anna Frank? Was she someone you could identify with, or was the mood of the whole story too overpowering to wish to do?
Oh, no. I think I identified with Anna as just another young person way before I identified as an actress. I originally read the diary when I was 13. That was before I was acting. I was just in high school. And I remember finding that she had somehow been able to express in words all the things that I was going through. And I think young people all over the world felt the same way, in countries as far away as Japan. And I know that for myself as an actress, and I'm sure for all the other young actresses who have played Anna Frank and who will play her in the centuries and the years to come, it was more than just another part or seeing my name in lights or hearing applause, although that was nice too. But for me, it was an inspiring experience.
I quite understand. Well, was there any section of Anna Frank's diary, Susan, which stands out in your mind?
Yes, for me, the end of Anna's diary, just before she was taken to Belton where she died, has a line which I think is an immortal and quite beautiful one. I know it's terrible trying to have any faith when people are doing such horrible things. But you know what I sometimes think? I think the world may be going through a phase the way I was with Mother. It'll pass. Maybe not for hundreds of years, but someday. I still believe, in spite of everything, that people are really good at heart.
A child in hiding in a Dutch ghetto writes her heart out. And on Broadway, the face of Anna Frank shines again for a moment in the portrayal of Miss Susan Strasberg, who played the role of Anna Frank. And through some magic, a true tragedy is transformed. The magic of actors, actresses, playwrights, and composers. The stage and all the arts of communication have long had a special attraction for the American Jew. Like the Irish, perhaps, with their gift for words, for fantasy, for storytelling, for a world of make-believe that is, I'm told, a very real industry in Hollywood and on Broadway. A world most familiar to Barney Balaban, head of Paramount Pictures, and movie producer and playwright Dory Sherry.
Dory, somewhere I remember reading that when you first arrived in Hollywood, you had $46 in your pocket and $1,400 in debt.
Well, happily, things have changed somewhat since then, Barney. I do remember that when my wife and I first hit Los Angeles at the height of the Depression in 1932, we got off to a good start. In those days, when you traveled by train, the railroad had a policy that if the chief arrived late, they made a partial refund on your ticket. Well, as luck would have it, we did get in late, so my wife and I were both handed $3 each. A very much appreciated total of $6, even before I went to work for Columbia Pictures.
In many ways, it was pretty much the same story for many of us. Those who came out and started the industry in the early days, immigrants themselves or sons of immigrants, a line of men who saw the possibilities of movies, Louis B. Mayer, Marcus Lowe, the Warner Brothers, Adolph Zucker, Nicholas Schenck, Sam Goldwyn, William Fox, Jesse Lasky, Harry Cohen.
Well, perhaps what you all felt was the excitement of a new medium. That here was something which placed a premium on a man's talent, and that the only limits to his success were his own powers. Perhaps some recognized that the screen wasn't a pulpit, but felt they could make films, not just as mere entertainment, but as something important and constructive in people's lives.
Well, and perhaps the best chance and stage for what I imagine is one of the warmest of Jewish characteristics, a sense of humor, the ability to make a man laugh and make others laugh.
Well, a good many of these men who made it in Hollywood and by the hundreds on Broadway were products of the Lower East Side. And their training grounds, as it's still for new comedians today, was very likely the outpost of summer hotels in the Catskill Mountains, once quaintly referred to but now nationally known as the Borscht Circuit, where new Americans first tasted the luxury of a vacation, where they could relax and refresh themselves, often to the songs their sons or neighbors had written. The songs of Jerome Kern, Sigmund Romberg, Irving Berlin, the incredible Richard Rodgers and Larry Hartz, and perhaps the most favorite of all, the songs written by George Gershwin and his brother Ira, as played by Stan Freeman.
Perhaps the search for a portrait of any one group in our country is no more complicated than discovering that they are engaged in the pursuit of happiness for themselves and for others, whether on the level of laughter, lyrics, or liberty. Where does this one community stand today? An answer best given by the head of America's largest Jewish service organization, Mr. Philip M. Klutznick, president of B'nai B'rith, which in its 114-year history and through its vigilant Anti-Defamation League has fought to guarantee the rights of all Americans.
In America, the Jew is one of hundreds of groups which responds in full measure to a nation which gives them freedom. One of many which make up an old truth. An old truth which sometimes needs retelling. That the strength of this country lies in the fact that it is a plurality, a community of communities. And the setbacks and the accomplishments of any one group is a measure of the climate and the health that all Americans do actually enjoy. The American Jew today, after a period of social evolution and adjustment, is at home. The measure of that full adjustment into the national picture is seen in a simple comparison. A generation or more ago, the problem tormenting many immigrants was this. As a Jew, how can I become a good American? Today, the children and grandchildren of these immigrants are likely to put the problem in a different way. As a good American, how can I be a better Jew? For the greatest strength of democracy is this. A man must fulfill himself and be himself.
One man says this is the best government devised by man. Millions agree with him. And millions today remember that day 17 years ago when an explosion at Pearl Harbor tried to sweep it away. December 7th was the beginning of the road back. For American Jews, today has a double meaning on the scoreboard of freedom. This is also the first day of the Jewish festival of Hanukkah, celebrated each year since the year 165 before the Common Era, as the festival of lights, the festival of freedom. Religious and political freedom won back by the Jews in the land of the Bible. A resistance to ancient tyranny under the leadership of their general Judah the Maccabee. A holiday marked with the lighting of a new candle each day for 8 days. Freedom has always the charm of a miracle. And in a land where so many men are hyphenated, the American Jew finds his two identities one. Whether he's a farmer, a fireman, a circuit-riding rabbi, or an airline stewardess, like all men who value freedom, he comes to America tailor-made. And America fits him like a glove.